Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Thank you for joining us. President Trump's battle against the so-called squad of Democrats has now reached the international stage. Israel has barred Congresswomen Rashida Tlaib of Michigan and Ilhan Omar of Minnesota from making a visit. It comes after President Trump tweeted that it would show great weakness if the country let them in. The two were planning to tour the Israeli-occupied West Bank on Sunday. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle have spoken out against Israel's decision. Even pro-Israel group AIPAC tweeted their support for Omar and Tlaib, writing, quote, "We believe every member of Congress should be able to visit and experience our democratic ally Israel firsthand." Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan has the details on why the Congresswomen are being blocked.
The things that they've said, Omar, Tlaib, what they've said is disgraceful. So I can't imagine why Israel would let them in.
President Trump said he urged the Israeli government to ban the two first Muslim Democratic congresswomen from entering that country. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a close friend of Mr. Trump, made the decision just hours after the president said it would show great weakness if Israel allowed Representative Omar and Representative Tlaib to visit. They hate Israel and all Jewish people. Netanyahu cited the Congresswoman's support for a boycott of Israel for what they say is abuse of Palestinian rights. Congresswoman Omar said Israel was undermining democratic values and accused the president of being an Islamophobe. Tlaib posted a picture of her Palestinian grandmother and said the decision was a sign of weakness. Their colleague, Minnesota Congressman Dean Phillips, said Israel's decision was appalling.
A tweet that calls Israel a weak country if they let them in is a dereliction of his leadership, a dereliction of duty, and a very dangerous precedent for all of us.
Israel previously said the Congresswomen would be allowed to visit. But in an unprecedented move, President Trump punished his political opponents by urging a U.S. ally to block them. No member of Congress has ever been banned from visiting Israel. Dan Shapiro was U.S. ambassador to Israel.
And it's hard to understand exactly what changed in the last 3 or 4 weeks, other than pressure from President Donald Trump because of his decision to treat these members of Congress as foils for his brand of divisive racist politics.
Why did Israel stop the Congresswomen from traveling? A combination of things. President Trump has been in a months-long feud with these controversial freshman Democrats, the so-called squad, and he has labeled them the face of the Democratic Party. For Benjamin Netanyahu, it's also political. He's within a month of a very close election, and he has campaigned on the strength of his relationship with President Trump. This public pressure forced his hand. Tanya?
Margaret Brennan, thank you. I'm joined by Emma Green. She's a staff writer at The Atlantic, where she covers politics, policy, and religion. Emma, thank you so much for being with us. We just heard President Trump there speaking about this ban against Representatives Omar and Tlaib, coming out in support of it once again. But you write that this is not an unprecedented move for Israel to ban Americans for one reason or another. Can you fill us in on that?
So in the past couple of years in particular, Israel has made the decision to block the entry of a Columbia University professor, leaders of the Presbyterian Church in the United States, and even an American student who had a student visa to study in Israel. The reason given is that all of these people support the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which encourages economic pressure on Israel, and the government says that it's justified in keeping them out. But even allies of Israel have said that this makes Israel seem anti-democratic and as though it can't handle dissent.
Right. So in this particular case, is it clear how much of an influence President Trump had on Israel here?
You know, what we have in front of us is the timeline. This morning we had a tweet from President Trump, as so often happens, which alleged that Representatives Omar and Tlaib hate Jews and hate Israel, and that it would be very weak, he said, for Israel to let them into the country. Very shortly after, we heard that this was confirmed, that Israel was going to ban them from entering the country. And what we also know is that for a month prior to this, we've known about the visit to Israel, and Israel has had the ability to say yes or no, and previously they had said they were going to let the women in.
So when you map out the TikTok like that, it seems pretty clear that Israel is listening to what President Trump says, or at least Benjamin Netanyahu is listening pretty carefully. But you write about the larger context of all of this, and you say this also points to the fact that there is a divide growing between Israel and American Jews, correct? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, what's so remarkable about this decision and the reaction is that groups that are very strongly pro-Israel, consider themselves to be totally aligned, have come out against it. This includes AIPAC, which is a pro-Israel lobbying group that condemned the decision on the basis that all members of Congress should be able to see Israel whether or not they agree with its policies. And we also have more progressive Jewish groups that have come out in opposition. All of this underscores a tension, a disagreement, a fundamental divide between American Jews and Israel, American Jews who really believe and want Israel to lean into its democratic character, and some decisions by the Netanyahu government that maybe have defied that.
And some of these American Jews who, by and large, have not supported President Trump's policy, some of them who draw parallels between some of the language and the rhetoric that he uses towards immigrants and, other Americans of color, let's say, and some of the language and rhetoric that they can point to going back to Nazi Germany. They feel pretty strongly about this. It seems that Netanyahu does not make any of those connections.
For American Jews, the vast majority of American Jews, there's this clear connection between social justice, defending of immigrants, and their own stories of their families coming to the United States, wanting to defend these principles. Seeing what President Trump has stood for during his administration, for many American Jews, it's offensive and deeply personal. But as we've seen, Prime Minister Netanyahu has allied with Trump at every turn and has essentially given up on any of that bipartisan diplomacy that maybe would allow many more American Jews to feel that connection to Israel.
So given up, there's no attempt anymore at outreach?
I would say maybe in a superficial sense, the Israeli government technically holds a position of wanting to have bipartisan outreach. And in fact, just last week, we had dozens of Democratic congresspeople going to Israel and visiting, trying to reinforce that relationship. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, Netanyahu sees his strongest ally in President Trump, and he has done whatever it takes to make sure that that alliance stays strong.
Does he risk alienating Israel on a global stage by doing this?
Certainly one of the ironies of this situation is that it shows that BDS, the Boycotts, Divestment, and Sanctions movement, really gets its biggest boost when there's an overreaction from Israel or when it's called out. So we see that now Israel has cracked down on these congresswomen. There's all of this condemnation from the United States, and it reinforces the views of Israel's critics around the world. So ultimately, overreaction can lead Israel to be in a worse position than when it started out.
And do we know what the Israeli people themselves feel about all of this? We know, they're a democracy like the United States, so not everyone is in lockstep with their leaders. Have they had any, comments?
It's funny. It's election season in Israel, and Netanyahu is facing the race for his life. He's already the longest-serving prime minister, but he really wants to hold on to his seat. And what we've seen is a lot of fatigue and divide among Israelis over Netanyahu's leadership, and also over all of these kinds of issues that tend to isolate Israel on the world stage. But what I can say from my reporting there is that, in general, Israelis don't support the BDS movement because BDS fundamentally denies some of the basic rights of Israelis to be in their land, and they probably also aren't as consumed by American affairs as we are here in the States.
They're not following it as closely as we are.
That's right.
Emma Green, thank you so much for coming to see us.
Thank you.